The letter arrived by courier, a crisp, formal envelope that felt strangely cold to the touch. It was from the company, our company, the one I had saved from the brink of extinction 6 months ago. The language was brutally corporate, full of terms like partnership dissolution, shareholder buyout, and termination of employment. It informed me that my position had been made redundant, and my minority shares had been compulsorily acquired, as per a clause in my investment contract. The final page, a formal notice of my expulsion from my own family's legacy, was signed with a bold, confident flourish by my sister Clara, the newly minted sole proprietor and CEO. The family business, a small manufacturing firm called Harris & Son, was my grandfather's entire world. He built it from nothing, and it became the source of our family's identity, our pride, and our income. My father inherited it, but he lacked my grandfather's innovative spirit. He was a caretaker, not a visionary, and over the past decade, the business had been slowly bleeding out. It was failing to adapt to a changing market, and the weight of its history was dragging it down into a sea of debt. The shame of potentially losing it was a constant unspoken tension in our home. My sister Clara was always the heir apparent. She had the right degree, the right ambition, and the right kind of ruthlessness that my father mistook for business acumen. I was the quiet one, with a passion for literature and a steady job at a local library. I was loved, I suppose, but I was never considered a serious player in the grand drama of the Harris family legacy. My future was seen as something separate, a gentle, unimportant side story to the main event, which was Clara's eventual ascension to the throne of the family business. Then, 2 things happened in quick succession. The business received a final warning from the bank, threatening foreclosure, and I received a letter from a lawyer informing me I was the sole beneficiary of my maternal grandmother's will. She had secretly amassed a small fortune and left it all to me. It was a life-altering sum of money, enough for me to pursue my own dreams, to buy a home, to live a life completely free from the suffocating pressure of my family's failing business. For a brief, wonderful moment, I had a future that was entirely my own. That moment ended the instant my family found out about my inheritance. The atmosphere in our home shifted overnight. Their desperation about the business didn't vanish. It simply refocused like a magnifying glass directly onto me. My personal good fortune was instantly reframed as the family's collective salvation. My private future was no longer my own. It was now a community resource, and a meeting was called to discuss its immediate liquidation for the good of the family name. The talk was no longer of bankruptcy, but of my solemn duty. The pressure campaign was a masterpiece of emotional blackmail. It wasn't presented as an opportunity for me, but as a test of my character. My father, a man broken by the impending failure, told me that my grandfather's spirit would never rest if the company he built was sold for scraps. My mother tearfully asked how I could even consider keeping the money for myself when the family was on the verge of losing everything. My future home, my dreams, were painted as selfish indulgences in the face of their collective crisis. Clara's approach was the most insidious. She didn't plead, she strategized. She told me this was my chance to finally be a true part of the legacy. She painted a picture of us working side by side, a new generation of Harris leaders revitalizing the company together. She made it sound like I wasn't just saving them. I was earning my place at the table, a place I had never truly been offered before. She was selling me a sense of belonging that I had always secretly craved, and the price was my entire inheritance. I held out for as long as I could. I argued that it was my money, a gift from my grandmother, who had no connection to the business. I said it was too much of a risk. My resistance was met with a cold, unified front. I was ostracized at family dinners. My calls went unanswered. They treated me like a traitor, a selfish outsider who was hoarding a lifeboat while the rest of the family drowned. They made it clear that my place in the family was conditional upon my financial sacrifice. The final blow came from my father. He sat me down in his study, surrounded by my grandfather's old photos and awards, and he wept. He told me he felt like a failure, that he had let his own father down. He said my inheritance was a miracle, a final chance to save our name, and he begged me, father to child, not to let him fail. To see my stoic, proud father so utterly broken was more than I could bear. In that moment, I knew I had lost. My future had been successfully sacrificed at the altar of our family's pride. I agreed. The wave of relief and joy that washed over them was immediate and overwhelming. Suddenly, I was no longer the villain. I was the savior. There were hugs, tears of gratitude, and a lavish dinner to celebrate the family's new beginning. For a few weeks, I was the hero of the story. I was praised for my generosity, for my loyalty. It was a heady, intoxicating feeling. I'd finally earned their unconditional love and respect, and I told myself that feeling was worth more than any amount of money. Clara and my father's lawyer drew up an investment agreement. It looked legitimate. It stipulated that my inheritance would be used as a capital injection in exchange for a 40% stake in the company. I would be a significant minority shareholder and a salaried director. It all seemed fair, a real partnership. I felt a surge of pride, a sense of finally stepping into a role of importance within the family. I was no longer the quiet librarian. I was a co-owner of Harris & Son. Buried deep within the document, on page 32, was a clause titled Corporate Restructuring and Majority Shareholder Prerogatives. When I asked about it, my father dismissed it as standard boilerplate. Clara explained it was a legal mechanism that would give her the flexibility to modernize the company, to make swift decisions without getting bogged down in shareholder votes. It's just to cut through red tape, she said reassuringly. It protects the business. Trusting them, believing I was finally on the inside, I signed it. The first few months were a dream. With the infusion of my cash, the business was resurrected. Old debts were paid off. New machinery was purchased and several key employees were hired. The mood was electric. For the first time, I was included in major decisions. Clara and I worked together, and it felt like the partnership she had promised. My father stepped back, officially naming her CEO and me as Director of Operations. I felt valued, respected, and genuinely happy. I had saved my family, and I had found my place. The change started once the company was stable. Clara, now firmly in control as CEO, began to use the power I hadn't realized I'd given her. Her first move was to reissue company shares to new investors, who turned out to be shell corporations owned by herself. This move, perfectly legal under the restructuring clause, massively diluted my own stake. My 40% share was suddenly reduced to less than 10%. When I protested, she told me it was a necessary step for tax efficiency and that I didn't understand the complexities of corporate finance. My parents, of course, sided with her. They told me I needed to trust Clara's expertise. She's the CEO for a reason, my father said. You're the operations guy. Let her handle the finances. My role was being redefined without my consent. I was being pushed back into a box. My power systematically stripped away under the guise of good business. The partnership was dissolving, and I was being legally demoted, all according to the fine print of the contract I had naively signed. I tried to fight back, to assert my rights as an investor, but I had no leverage. The restructuring clause gave her almost unlimited power. She started making executive decisions without consulting me at all, from changing our suppliers to altering our product lines. When I would question her, she would patiently explain that as the majority shareholder, she had the final say. The family hero was quickly becoming a disgruntled employee, a nuisance in the company I had personally funded. The final brutal move came 3 months later. Clara called a formal board meeting, which consisted of herself, my father, and me. She announced that she was executing the final part of the restructuring clause, the mandatory buyout of minority shareholders for the purpose of corporate consolidation. She informed me that the company was exercising its right to purchase my remaining shares at a predetermined valuation stipulated in the contract. The valuation was a pittance, a tiny fraction of my initial investment, calculated on the company's near-bankrupt state before my money had saved it. I was stunned. I looked at my father for support, but he just stared down at the table, his face a mask of weary resignation. He was a willing accomplice to my execution. The clause they had called standard boilerplate was, in fact, a legal garrote designed from the beginning to squeeze me out once my money had done its job. They hadn't wanted a partner. They had wanted a temporary bank, a disposable savior. My role in the family drama was over, and I was being written out of the script. And so, the courier arrived with the letter that made it all official. I had been legally and methodically purged from the company. My inheritance was gone, my position was gone, and my stake in the family legacy had been vaporized. I had been used in the most cynical way imaginable to rescue their dream, and then I had been discarded like a piece of used-up scaffolding. Clara was now the sole owner of a thriving, debt-free business, a business I had effectively bought for her. When I tried to confront them one last time, there was no anger or drama. There was just a cold, quiet finality. "It was a business decision, that's all," Clara said, as if she were talking about switching office supply vendors. "The company needs a single, clear vision to move forward." My mother told me I should be proud of the sacrifice I had made for the family. They genuinely saw nothing wrong with what they had done. In their eyes, the survival and success of the business under Clara's control was the ultimate good, justifying any and all means. I see now that the entire thing was a setup, a long con played with my emotions and my desire to belong. They knew the business was on the verge of collapse. They knew I was coming into a significant amount of money. They used my love for my father and my longing for their approval as levers to pry my future away from me. They didn't just see my inheritance as a solution, they saw it as their property, a family asset that had been inconveniently parked in my bank account. The injustice is a physical weight. Every day I drive past the company and I see the new trucks, the renovated facade, the now hiring sign out front. I see the thriving business that my grandmother's legacy paid for. And I know that inside, my sister is sitting in my grandfather's old office, building her empire on the foundation of my stolen inheritance. She is living a life of success and respect that was purchased entirely with my sacrifice, a sacrifice she and my parents engineered. They have successfully laundered their betrayal through the language of business. They call it restructuring, buyouts, and tough decisions. But I know what it was. It was theft. A deliberate, methodical, and legally sanctioned theft of my future, perpetrated by the three people I was raised to believe I could trust above all others. They didn't just break a contract. They broke the fundamental covenant of family, the unspoken promise that we protect our own. I lost more than just the money. I lost my sense of place in the world. My identity was tied to my family, and they have shown me that my place within it was purely transactional. I was useful to them as a source of capital. Once that capital was transferred, my usefulness ended. The love and respect I thought I had earned were just a temporary bonus, a reward for my compliance, which was revoked the moment I was no longer needed. It's a profoundly dehumanizing realization. Now, they expect me to carry on as if nothing has happened. They invite me to family dinners and holidays, expecting me to sit at the table and listen to them celebrate Clara's business acumen. They expect me to applaud her success, the very success that was built on my ruin. To them, my silence and complicity are the final price I must pay for the privilege of remaining in the family. They don't just want my money, they want my silent, smiling endorsement of their crime. My grandmother left me that money so I could have a life of my own, free from the drama and expectations of the Harris family. She gave me a way out, and in my weakest moment, I let my family pull me back in and feed my future to the machine of their own legacy. I failed her, and I failed myself. The guilt of that is, in some ways, heavier than the anger I feel toward them. I had a choice. and I chose to believe in a fantasy of family that was never real. I am sharing this because I need to warn others. Be careful when family mixes with business. Be wary when love and duty are used to justify financial sacrifice. Guilt is a powerful weapon, and the people who know you best know exactly where to aim it. Never, ever sign a legal document without your own independent counsel, no matter how much they tell you it's just boilerplate. Your future is not a community asset to be voted on. It is yours alone, and you must protect it fiercely. The cruelest part of it all is that I was happy to help. If they had been honest, if they had asked for a loan or even a gift, I might have given it. But they didn't want a gift. They wanted it all. They didn't want a partner. They wanted a silent temporary bank. They disguised their greed as a crisis of legacy, and they used my love and my loyalty to execute a flawless corporate takeover of my own future. The betrayal wasn't in the taking, it was in the profound and utter deception. The family name, the legacy they were so desperate to save, now means nothing to me but a brand of betrayal. Harris and Son. It was once a source of pride, a connection to my grandfather. Now it is a monument to my family's moral corruption. They saved the name, but they destroyed the family. And they did it with my money, leaving me with nothing but the ashes of my inheritance and the cold, hard lesson about the true nature of their love. I'm rebuilding my life, far from them, on my own quiet terms. It is a slow and difficult process. But every dollar I earn for myself, every small step I take forward is a victory. It is a testament to my own resilience, a strength they never saw and could never take from me. They stole my inheritance, but they will not steal my will to survive. I will build my own legacy, one that has nothing to do with their tarnished family name.